So today we're going to take a look at the Space Marine Primaris Chaplain on bike. It's an increasingly popular model put out by Games Workshop for Warhammer 40,000, and it's one that I've wanted. And so recently came across my desk, and so I thought it would be great to do a review and take a look at it with you all. Pretty much what we're going to do is look over the kit. I'm going to be showing this in two parts. First part I'm going to be doing some unboxing and building. Second part I'm going to be doing some painting. I'm going to give my thoughts on the whole kit by the end, but as we go, probably going to talk about some different parts of it, what I like, anything maybe I don't like, things like that. The booklet, of course, is included. You always get a pretty nice instruction booklet from them. There's no verbal instructions listed. You don't really need them. In fact, I'm not even going to end up using the instruction booklet throughout the build that I do on this, but it is something that you might want to use. The sprue design has, for quite a while, been done on computer with Games Workshop. Some people really like that, some people don't. They do have quite a good level of detail consistency in them, and they're able to really efficiently put them on sprue. Sometimes how you like the model sliced may or may not be up to your taste, but it's just one of those things. So we're gonna, of course, need to pull out some tools to work on it. Gonna get my cutting mat and some very low-cost nippers that I like to use. You can replace these things for super cheap. If anybody wants to talk about hobby tools at some point, just let me know in the comments below, and so that may be a topic for further discussion. And so these nippers are pretty bulky. They're not super large or anything, but they, on a kit like this that has more fine details, you just want to be a little patient and go through. The plastic is still really robust. I'm going to come in and cut from the bottom, which is something I really like to do. It's just a technique of cutting rather than kind of going in from the top. And hard for me to get this on camera as I'm trying to look through. Try to get better at that, but pretty much just as long as you're taking care and not cutting directly next to the detail of the part, leaving a little bit of extra nub for you to come back and clean, it's going to come out pretty good. And this kit has done a good job on this as well. I've not run into any real issues. Get my first sprue of parts together and go on to my second sprue, and there's a iron halo in this that I'm going to keep separate because I'm going to do this in sub-assembly, and that may be one of the trickier little bits, but just take your time and get a good look at everything. So far, cutting out the kit, I've liked it pretty well. There's no egregious nub marks or anything like that, but of course you're going to have to go through some cleanup. Over the years, I've kind of developed my sort of style of using my hobby knife. It's perfectly safe for me, but definitely use care when you're cutting on yours. It's good to have a nice sharp knife, but mine's not always consistently that sharp. I've gotten used to using it in whichever way. And one thing I would say to people is make sure to clean your mold lines. That really helps when you get to paint. Here I'm going to actually look at some of the parts where I've cut away on the kit, and I'm going to look at sanding. Sanding is pretty helpful. I do it on a lot of the kits. I tend to use finer grit sandpaper than you hear a lot of people talk about. I don't know about their models or anything, but I've got a little stick here I'm using that's 400 grit and then some 600 grit. And this particular kit, I would say, for the mechanical parts of the bike, the flat areas, it's super duper useful. It's got a middle seam all the way down. As you see, it's cut in half, the bike body is, and also the way that the wheels and things go together here. It's not really the tires so much here that you're going to see me gluing together. They have good registers, and they're pretty well marked, so I like that about this kit. But using some thin cement's a really good idea. I wouldn't use the thick everywhere on this particular model because it does have a lot of good detail, delicate detail, and if you get goopy with your cement, it's gonna definitely show through, and you're gonna ruin some of the detail. Here you can see that the way it goes together, you can do this a little bit different way. I just chose to go about it this way. It's actually pretty close to how the instructions do end up showing it. But I'm using the thicker glue on the heavier seam because I'm going to be able to go back and clean that up. And as long as you don't overbuild the kit all at once, you can definitely get into the deeper areas and fix any of your seam lines and smooth them out and stuff like that, sort of hide that when you go back into paint. And so I've actually added a little bit of glue where the axle is too, because that's going to give me a better bond on this one. Now I'm pretty much just showing this part again because this is a good example earlier on in the build of this kit where I'm going to clean up part of that middle seam line. It's easy on the front fender out from under where the barrels of the guns and things are, because you can actually get at it quite a bit more simply. You know, once the cement is nice and stable, I go in with the knife, and then after that I'm going to use the sanding stick again because it's a flat part. I pretty much reuse that same technique all throughout the rest of the build, and I'm not going to show the entire build because this isn't about building the kit directly step by step. It's more just kind of my thoughts on the kit as I go, basic review of the build, and whatnot there. So after this, you'll see we'll skip ahead to another section, pretty much the completed bike chassis from there. And that's pretty much it. It doesn't have the outer fairing around the body of the bike, but it's a really nice looking bike. The Outrider chassis is definitely cool. In fact, I actually call this the Outrider Chaplain on purpose, just because it's easier. But it's a sweet bike. It's going to be fun to paint. This is basically one of the legs, and that's going to pretty much mark where you're gonna swap tools on a kit like this. It's got small details, it's got rounded parts, and you're not gonna always want to use something like a sanding stick. So some more flexible sanding, if you got a sanding sponge. I like paper, like just with the pressure of your finger, like the thickness of a finger, it still works around round parts to get rid of any defects, nub marks, mold lines, stuff like that, really well. And once again, I'm going to go back to thin cement because there are so many more fine details and sandwich bits, like how this kit is cut. That shin guard, that's actually pretty common with these Primaris kits. If I go over any more kits in the future, I'm sure we'll see it again. I've got a ton in my pile of shame like everybody does, right? But this kit actually came up with a good opportunity to really shore up that seam with the thin cement. There's a line behind the greave on both legs that you can just kind of paint it in there nice and smooth, just be nice and steady. I brace my hands with this just like you would bracing for a paint technique, which it's something we may go over at some point. But yeah, this really helps make sure we've got a nice firm connection on that. Those armor pieces, especially the oh gosh, I can't remember what it's called, but it's the bit that hangs down from the waist, the armor plate. They're fragile on there until you get it glued down, so it's a good idea to make sure it's stable. And I've been working on the bits in the background you see. So this is for a Blood Angels army, in my case, currently, so I pulled out my Blood Angels bit box because I need to add at least one piece of detail that separates this guy out as a Blood Angels Outrider Chaplain. And I have all these bits. Some are painted, some are not. I have an unopened sprue box there. But what we're looking for is something unique for his shoulder pad, really. I'm going to use the base shoulder pad, as you'll see here in a second. So I've got that shoulder pad, and at this point I have not cleaned it up. Basically just determined that I was going to go with the old tried and true winged blood drop that a lot of players have access to when you have any Blood Angels kits. Honestly, go with what works. I mean, I just didn't want to use a decal in this case. I just wanted something a little bit more 3D that I had access to quick. So, gonna dry fit it, clean up the shoulder pad, and then go on with actually cementing it in place. Now, I'm pretty sure I just used the thin plastic cement on this again. I've just made sure to arrange it where I want, and it works perfectly fine. And so moving on to sort of just seeing kind of the final stages of the body of the bike. I'll go on later to sort of add those fairing parts, but one of the most important stages is drilling out the barrels on these bolt rifles on the bike. Always drill out your bolt apple barrels if you can. Remember, guys, there's ways to make your models look good without it, or good enough, but if you can drill them, just do it. It's really easy with a pin vise. You get a lot of control. Just be patient. You'll get them nice. And I like to use a little toothbrush to clean out the extra bits. And yeah, once you get paint in there, super nice. So really one of the final things I'll talk about on this build is the base. Every other part during the build is pretty much just rinse and repeat on the steps that I've already shown with it. They're all good parts. There's some smaller parts, you know, you just be delicate when you clean things, be deliberate and stuff like that. Probably the halos, iron halo that comes in this kit's one of the more harder things to clean around and a couple of the small bits, but you know, just be nice and patient when you're cutting parts out and cleaning them. You know, that'll make this kit work really, really well. And so here, just working on the base, one thing I would say about this base is you want to line up that center rock piece just right as you glue it down. Cement will give you a little bit of working time, but you definitely want to, I mean, I would dry fit this kit as much as you can. A lot of kits too, really. And so the last thing you'll see me do here is add like a little bit of extra detail. I'm just putting it in before the texture paste fully dries. And that's pretty much it. Ready for paint. So I wanted this done in sub-assembly. We're about to go over that here. And so far, first impressions of the kit are very good. And so we'll see here the sub-assembly. I do have the base. I've got the primary bike chassis, leg, exhaust, book, handlebars, head, a couple extra detailed bits, the iron halo I talked about, the torso, backpack, right leg, and the exhaust. And one thing I would say on this is I did do a little clipping on the back so that backpack will fit in nicer, but other than that, these parts are ready to be mounted and put in for paint. And so that's going to be something we'll go over. And so one thing I'm pointing out here at the end is just that where the way this model is done on computer, it's keyed, so that makes it easier to put some controlled glue in there, and you can glue them after they're painted. There is an alternate way to do this, and I'll probably talk more about that when I talk about paint, but until then, for part 2, we will end for now on part 1, and hopefully see you all next time. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button, consider subscribing, and definitely share. If you have ideas for future video topics, put them in the comments below, as well as any other questions. I'm always learning, and I'll be interested to see what you all have to say. Bye for now.